What was the biggest bullet you dodged? A few years ago I had pneumonia, but my whole family insisted that it was just postnasal drip, which runs in the family. After a week or two I woke up in the middle of the night when I couldn't feel my arm. After I got to the ER, the doctor said that it was the worst he'd ever seen and he was surprised I wasn't dead. I had 3 pounds of mucus cut out of my lungs and another 2 weeks in the hospital siphoning out the rest. For 3 months afterwards I could barely walk half a mile without starting to pass out, and I still can't run for more than 200-300 yards without collapsing. Many years ago, my flight had just landed at Chicago O'Hare and the plane was taxiing when the pilot suddenly slammed on the brakes. People were literally thrown forward against the seat in front of them. A few seconds later, another plane, taking off I think, went screaming by right in front of us. No explanation was given, though our imaginations provided a lot of gory details. Just regular Chicago drivers. Around £30,000. I was driving with my wife in town one snowy evening and we had pulled up to a stoplight. I happened to glance up at the rearview mirror and saw a city bus heading towards us, and rotating sideways. I hit the gas and pulled ahead into the intersection and left into the turning lane, and less than a second later, the bus went sliding through right where our car was. It came to a stop on the other side of the intersection and fortunately didn't hit anything, but 1 second or 2 feet difference and we would have had some nice spinal injuries. As a kid, after running errands in town with my mom, I was climbing into the backseat of our family station wagon. A semi-truck hit a power line pole down the street, causing the still live wire to fall, bounce off the roof of the car and hang across the open door just a foot or two above my legs. Raised Catholic, I wondered for a while after if I had actually died that day and that the rest of what I thought was my life was my purgatory. Not changing jobs in early 2020 would have been a short-lived promotion after early restructuring and layoffs. I changed jobs the 9th of March, 2020. 2 days later my city shut down and everyone was sent to work from home. My new company committed to zero covered layoffs. The company I left laid off about 80% of my department. Dodged a bullet, haha. A friend had lost his job under suspicious circumstances. A few weeks later he asked me to take him to the bank. As I got near to pick him up I caught a train. He called to say never mind, he would get someone else. A few days later a friend sent out a message to a large number of our friends. This guy lost his job and was running a check cashing con. Can you cash this check for me? I'll pay you $50 if you do. The check is $500. He has no backing funds. You eat the whole amount. He did this to several friends in a few days to amass a few grand and was about to skip town when the cops got him. Halfway through this I was thinking you dodge being an unknown getaway driver for a bank robbery. Not me, but I had a field service engineer working on one of my big robotic liquid handlers. He decided to bypass the safety pin that prevents the heads from moving while the cover is open while he had a diagnostic program queued up on the computer. What he didn't know was that the instant he reinserted the safety pin the machine would execute the queued instructions and start moving. And he had a hand inside it right in the danger zone. I grabbed his shoulder and yanked his hand out an instant before it was crushed. He stopped ignoring me when I told him to stop bypassing safety lockouts to save a few minutes. Wow, I'm sure this guy isn't completely responsible for you guys putting a safety system in place, but it sounds like he certainly had a hand in it. After I had a stroke, I was in a coma and it didn't look like I'd wake up. The DRS asked my wife if they should let me go. I only exist because she said no. I didn't dodge a bullet so much as my wife blocked it for me. Honestly, this made me tear up a little. Please tell your wife that she's incredible. My aunt did something similar. She saved her husband from a heart attack by using her nursing experience and network to get him on the table before it even started. To this day even doctors have no idea what caused his heart attack. But my aunt and your wife are legit superheroes. My newborn needed to be rushed to a super high level NICU to be put into a state of induced hypothermia, because he only had hours before he would suffer permanent brain damage. I live in a small town in the middle of nowhere. The small town next door just barely upgraded their hospital to have that hypothermia suite, one of only a few in Texas. He's doing great. No sign of any damage. Our daughter is an ICU baby too. The only piece of unsolicited advice I will ever give expecting parents is when you're checking out hospitals, make sure to check out the NICU and select a hospital with a good one. You probably won't need it, but if you do you'll be happy it's there. Daughter is 4 now and a healthy little spitfire. Glad your son is too. I stayed up all night before a day trip to Hong Kong. You know that days when you haven't slept, you're just kinda robotic and doing the human stuff. Nearly zero awareness of anything. Well, I went to cross his street and my friend behind me snatched my shoulder and yanked me backwards just in time to feel the whoosh of a double-decker bus breezing past us. I just looked at him like, oh, thanks man, and it took a whole extra minute for my brain to process I would be offended had he not grabbed me. I think I saved a baby's life once. It was in a city center, crossing a main road with a wild bunch of other people. The dad was pulling the pram behind him onto the pavement while he texted on his phone, and the dumb F didn't realize he'd left the pram just there on the road while he himself was on the pavement. Everyone kinda ignored it while the traffic lights kept that section of road clear, but then the lights changed and the effing moron still hadn't looked up from his phone while a huge double-decker was bearing down on his offspring. Out of the whole crowd I was the only one to push forward and pull the pram onto the pavement. The complete imbecile gave a grunt of surprise and dropped his phone as the bus whooshed past and he realized he'd utterly failed in his parenting responsibilities, which was some consolation. I hope it shattered. Thanks you all for the praise. I don't feel good about the situation though, just seething fury. And to those who told me I should have let the baby die, go eat a takeaway bag of shit on your way to a therapist. About why the bus driver didn't stop I honestly have no idea. There were a few seconds between me pulling the pram back and my memory of the bus going by. Maybe he realized it would be fine. Or maybe he was driving automatically and hadn't noticed. Whatever. I'm just glad I didn't have to see a baby die painfully that day. Was going to move to a different apartment complex last month, got injured at work and lost hours. Therefore, couldn't come up with the deposit money in time. Last week some A-hat was cooking meth and caught the building on fire. Hubs, my sister, and I were hanging out around my parents' house on a very boring 4th of July. We decided to wash my husband's new car sitting in the driveway because it was hot out and an excuse to play in the hose. We were literally walking out the front door, and I said, hey, we should eat lunch before we get all wet and stuff, and everyone agreed. So we turned around and went back inside. I was warming up something in the microwave, a hot pocket I think, and all of a sudden I hear the loudest bang I think I've ever heard, from the direction of the front door. Hubs and I look at each other wide-eyed and run outside. I was greeted by the back end of a Crown Vic, smoking something fierce, plowed into the tree in the middle of our yard. For a split second I was just stunned, then screamed to my sister inside to call 911. I looked over to the driveway, at the car we had been planning to wash just 5 minutes ago. Totaled. Completely totaled. Brand new 2011 G6. Destroyed. I hit it so hard it did a complete 90-degree turn across the driveway. He actually hit it so hard, it ended up ricocheting and hitting the other cars in the driveway, mauling 2 other cars. Yard was F-ed. Crown Vic was F-ed. Tree was F-ed. We immediately assumed it was drunk driving. Being the 4th and all, I went over to the driver's side and found a very old man, very bewildered, unable to comprehend what I was saying but conscious. I will never forget the look he gave me, confused, helpless, scared. I was on the line with the paramedics as they sent over the ambulances, and tried my best to follow their instructions. My sister was only 14 at the time, so I handled the call. Turns out dude was diabetic and had passed out behind the wheel due to low blood sugar, hit the gas pedal with his weight as he passed out, and was plowing down our residential street at about 65 miles per hour. He jumped the curb, drove down the sidewalk past another house, then slammed into my husband's car, and subsequently, the tree. If we had been anywhere near that yard driveway, I have no doubt one or all of us would have been seriously injured or dead. It was sheer dumb luck and timing that saved us. Huge bullet dodged, or should I say, huge cut dodged. I will never judge myself for craving hot pockets again. One day, they just might save my life. I can answer this in a literal way. When I was a child, I was playing video games with my little brother. Well, he found our dad's gun and fired it. No one was hurt, but it scared the shit out of me. My younger brother used to dry fire guns at me, till one time he fired a live one right by my head. Dad came home and wondered why he had a huge, black eye. I survived a rocket attack that landed about 10 meters from me, very close to where we were standing. We were so close to the launch site that the warning alarm came after the rocket had already impacted. Thankfully, we were able to dive under a vehicle for some shelter and the three of us made it through unscathed. There was a pile of stuff that people would leave at our house when I was at university, coats and stuff. Moving out day and we found a random samurai sword in the pile. We were messing about with it trying to make it go swoosh. I was stood facing my brother while he was swishing it when the blade dislodged from the handle, flew straight past me and stuck horizontally into my headboard. So yeah, my brother nearly impaled me while messing around with a random sword we found after a house party. Pics for proof. https imgur.com gallery kdtl. I can hear our sword screaming about wall hanger staying on the wall lol. I interviewed for a job that I wanted desperately in August 2019. After the initial phone interview, I went in for an in-person interview at 4 PM on a Wednesday. I had a rejection in my inbox by 8 PM and was completely gutted. Then 2020 happened, and they laid off 60% of their staff and will probably go under. I'm thankful for that rejection every day. When my great aunt passed away, I was helping to clean out her house. I'm just dragging everything out of the basement and suddenly my dad is like, "Whoa. Put that down gently and let's move away from here." So I put the weird metal tube type thing I'm carrying down and get out of there. Turns out it's a mortar shell from when my aunt worked in a munitions factory during WWII. Bomb squad came and took it away. I'm just casually going to take a mortar from work. No problem at all, as you do. Did you ever hear back from the bomb squad about whether or not it was still active? If they took it rather than safely detonating it, I would imagine it was almost certainly inactive. Unless there's more to this story than OP is letting on. My mother left me in one state and went back to my abusive stepfather. She tried to get me to drop out of my senior year at HS, move back to their state and just get my GED. They wanted a live-in babysitter, cook and maid. I was so lucky my grandparents let me move in with them and finish school. It's always the grandparents that are the true homies. Grandparents have the grim misfortune of seeing their children become complete assholes, and then treat their grandkids the way they wish they'd treated their kids. My high school sweetheart and fiance was my bullet. He ghosted me out of nowhere. No explanation, just gone. So needless to say, no wedding. I sent the ring back to his mom cause I didn't want it and was pissed. I go on to live a great life, find a wonderful guy, and we have been happily married for 21 years. 25 years later I find out that my old flame had been arrested for underage solicitation, sexting underage girls, possession of child porn, and many charges of sex with minors. Apparently Mr. Big Man in his community was arrested in a sting operation after this 12-year-old girl's parents found a whole series of explicit texts and had found that he set up a romantic hotel room get-together for them. Police pretended to be her and he was caught in the parking lot of the hotel. Even better, he was married to the same chick he was apparently seeing while we were together, and had a couple of kids, all around the same age of his victims. Before finding all this out, I regretted for a long time that we didn't work. After finding out this had been going on for at least 20 years, I was rather glad I got ghosted. Never been so glad to dodge a bullet. Freshman year of college I had a calc class. It was material I had learned before, but for various reasons they didn't give me transfer credit, so I skipped class quite frequently, though I usually slept in. One morning I find myself awake at 8:30 and not really feeling like sleep. Might as well check in on the class and see what's going on. It was the midterm exam. As a chronic procrastinator, I've been there, but I've also noticed it a day too late and that feels bad, man. Getting chased by someone with a knife across my apartment. I closed my door at the right moment, so that person ended up stabbing my wooden door instead. The mark was there until I left the apartment a few years later as a constant reminder of what could have been. And why was this person trying to stab you? I'm gonna go with the old classic. What are you gonna do? Stab me? Unfortunate, but a good morale boost. Chime late for work, opens door to knife mark A. Could have been worse. Not my story, but a girl I knew had had a few drinks and decided to hitchhike home. A town about 40 minutes away from the one she'd been drinking in. Note it is very common for people to hitchhike in this area. She gets picked up by a car of guys. All seems fine until she points out they can drop her off just up ahead. And they keep driving. She had that instant sober feeling. She plays it off like she's clueless and totally down to keep hanging out with them, acting like she's very drunk. Meanwhile they're back in more forested area of the highway. Then she fake dry heaves and says she about to puke, really putting on a show, so they stop to let her out. She books it into the bushes and just doesn't look back until she's safe. When I was in high school we had a cop come talk to us about what to do if we were in the car with someone and things didn't feel right. They said to use the 3 P's and say you desperately gotta puke, gotta pee, or gotta poop, and the FR more often than not cares more about their car getting soiled than whatever they wanted to do to you, and will let you out. That is absolutely genius of her. It's honestly frightening that she had to come up with that idea in the first place, but it's a good she didn't start panicking, giving them the clue that she knew what they were doing. That was very smart of her. When I was in middle school I wanted to buy a fedora, but none could fit my head. Euphoric. In 1992 I was 16. A bunch of us were about to leave a party and I called shotgun. But my friend Pat kind of wrestled me out of the spot and I wound up jumping in another car since the first car was now full. The other driver and I watched as our friend cascaded into oncoming traffic. Pat was airlifted to the local trauma hospital where his dad told a huge group of us teenagers that Pat had succumbed to his injuries. Maybe that's not exactly bullet dodged, but similar story. I was going out with my mom and sister when I was in about middle school. I always sat in the passenger side back seat if it was more than me and the driver. My sister decided at the last second that she would stay home, and we got T-boned on the way home in a hit and run. The other car totaled our car, with all the damage on the back passenger seat, where I should have been sitting. I still think about that often. I prefer the driver's side, with the assumption that the driver will be more aware of and responsive to threats on the same side. That thought has guided the placement of the car seat for my kid's entire life. At 17 I met and married a sweet little North Carolina daddy's girl. Had I not, I would have still been hanging with my friends that just discovered heroin. Of the 3 friends, 2 are dead and 1 did 10 years in prison. Everyone I used to know, including family members, got into heroin. I loved to party and had done all the drugs with them up to the point of heroin, and probably would have got into it too if it weren't for my GF at the time forbidding me from it. Thank God I loved her more than drugs to listen to her. A lot of them are dead. My sister and the rest of them are locked up. Almost proposed to a girl who had been cheating on me with a pile of that called himself my best friend. This was years ago, and I'm getting married at the end of the month to the love of my life. Life has a way of working itself out. I had a cardiac arrest about 4 years ago. Dropped dead-ish, in the middle of my shift. Found out after I woke up about a week later that A. The manager who saw me fall was a former lifeguard and knew proper CPR. B. An ambulance happened to be passing about 2 blocks away. C. Probably the best cardio unit in my state was a 10-minute ambulance ride from where it all happened. Walked out of the hospital about 2 weeks later. Full recovery. Just before starting HS, I got hit by a car doing 35 miles per hour. While riding my bike, T-boned. My bike went under the car. I was thrown up, smashed the windshield out with my back, was flipped over the car, and landed a perfect no-hop landing, on my feet, like a gymnast, minus the arms raised flourish at the end. The entire accident was witnessed by a firefighter who was watching out his window, literally standing right next to his emergency radio, and called for an ambulance. The lady who hit me got out of her car, yelling, I'm a nurse. I'm a nurse. Lie down. I had no breaks or fractures, just a bruised ribcage. My dad was going through severe depression 10 years ago and my life was equally shitty for a whole multitude of reasons. And it was rubbing off on me. I spent what felt like half an hour crying on the floor and working up the nerve to pull the trigger. Then when I finally did, the safety was on. I sold my gun the next morning. Wish my dad was able to say the same 3 years later. RIP. A literal police car. The police were chasing someone and I was crossing the road and my dumbass was walking slowly and the police car nearly grazed me. Look both ways and take off your headphones when you cross the road, kids. 7.92 Mauser rifle bullet. When I was 15ish I was very depressed and got very drunk. Found my great grandfather's WWI captured German rifle. Found some bullets from that time. Loaded it and put the rifle in my mouth and pulled the trigger. Thankfully the bullet was not loaded properly, was a dud for being 90 years old at the time, and did not fire. You got extremely lucky. I am shooting 70-year-old ammo and it's very rare to have a dud. Glad you made it through. I think the intent was clear, but fixed it. I was walking down the street in downtown Chicago and I heard a loud bang followed by a woman screaming. Somebody dropped a full-to-liter bottle of soda from the 13th floor and it just missed me. It was essentially a giant bullet at that height and speed. The woman screaming was about 5 feet behind me. She was the second closest to being hit. I'm pretty sure that bottle would have killed me if it hit me. See. One time at school we were practicing cadences for drumline. A light fell from the roof, around 30 feet high. One of those lights with the diameter of a basketball and looks like half a sphere, hit the ground, and shattered 1 foot to my right. Don't think I would have died but probably would have gotten a concussion and it would have hurt a lot. A guy pursued me for 3 years and I couldn't get away from him no matter how hard I tried. But finally he got sued for harassment and RE of multiple women. Literally, I was walking back to our barracks in Afghanistan talking with my peers and my staff sergeant. We get to one part, my staff sergeant grabbed my collar and pulled me back. Right there was a unexploded 40mm grenade projectile from a launcher sitting where my foot was about to land. Big yikes. My GF and I were going to see Cats, the movie. Our Uber pulls up and straight away we notice something about the driver. To this day, we can't articulate what it was, other than to say he just felt off. We got into his car, already hesitating and a touch anxious. He looks at us in the rearview mirror and makes a comment like "two lovely ladies in my car tonight" or some weird sh. A few minutes in, he makes another semi-sexual innuendo comment about riding with him. My friend notices the handle of a knife just poking out the side of his jacket. She says, "Hey, can we stop at 7-11? We need to grab a Gatorade real quick." So we go in and refuse to come back out. We're considering whether to call the police or not. It was so creepy, but what would we say? Some dude was creepy to us, and while we're hesitating, he winds down his window, brandishes this effing hunting knife at both of us, screams something about devil women and then just tears it out the parking lot. To this day, my GF and I are so thankful that we got out of that Uber. Otherwise we would have made it to the movies in time and we would have seen Cats. Well, about 15 years ago I dated a guy for less than a year. It was an awful, abusive relationship and I was happy to get out of it when I did. About 8-9 years ago, I saw him on the news. He strangled his girlfriend to death. He then dismembered her and lived with her body for a month or so before he was caught. Missed a train by seconds. Got on the one after. The one I missed hit someone. X said we can have unprotected sex after getting some unfortunate news from her gynecologist. Something felt off. Few years later she had twins with some guy. Went to kill myself by putting a plastic bag over my head and tying it off. Figured it would be less messy to be found. My cat started going crazy on the other side of the door when I started to get lightheaded and feel sort of nauseous. I thought, oh right, you need your dinner and no one else will feed you, and I untied the bag to feed the cat. After the fact I realized my cat literally saved me from one of my lowest points. God, I miss that cat. Still can't believe I came that close. When I was 15, I'm 16 now. I was being manipulated and lied to by a 20-year-old man for sex. I brought the topic on Reddit so people could give me their opinion, and a random Redditor helped me snap out of it. A few weeks ago I talked to the 20-year-old and I then completely understood that he just saw me as a walking hole to stick his dick in.